The small town of Carson Valley in Nevada had long carried a shadow that no one dared speak about openly. In the summer of 2002, 15-year-old Isabella Moreno disappeared on her way home from a friend's house. She was a bright, outgoing girl with a talent for painting and an easy laugh that seemed to light up every room she entered. Her sudden disappearance sent shockwaves through the community, and parents grew increasingly anxious as days turned into weeks without a single lead. Initial searches involved local police, volunteers, and even neighboring towns. But despite their best efforts, Bella seemed to have vanished into thin air. The case quickly went cold, and the town, while outwardly carrying on, remained haunted by unanswered questions and whispered suspicions. Bella's family, desperate for any clue, combed through her belongings and retraced her steps endlessly. Her room, filled with sketches and journals, offered no hint of her intentions or possible destinations. Investigators had initially focused on the usual suspects, local teenagers, family acquaintances, and known troublemakers, but no evidence pointed decisively in any direction. Years passed, and the case became a lingering pain in the heart of Carson Valley. Parents kept a watchful eye on their children, but the invisible weight of Bella's disappearance never left, and the community slowly became accustomed to living with a persistent fear and sorrow. Psychologists would later explain that unresolved traumatic events like this create a communal stress, subtly altering behavior patterns, interpersonal trust, and overall social cohesion. Despite the stagnation, the case file remained open, preserved carefully by the Nevada State Police. Detectives periodically revisited the evidence, driven by a quiet hope that advancements in forensic science might someday provide answers. It wasn't until 2020, nearly 18 years later, that a breakthrough emerged. Modern DNA analysis, combined with a meticulous review of previously overlooked items from Bella's case, revealed a small but critical clue: a strand of hair discovered under the back porch of a neighbor's house. At the time of the investigation, the hair had been dismissed as inconsequential, assumed to belong to a passerby or a pet. But with the sensitivity of contemporary forensic techniques, the sample could now yield a profile that might finally unlock the mystery. Detective Hannah Cruz, who had recently joined the cold case unit, recognized the potential significance immediately. Her experience with decades-old cases had taught her that even minor, seemingly insignificant evidence could become the key to justice. Cruz requested that the sample undergo comprehensive DNA profiling, comparing it against national databases and other unsolved cases. As the laboratory results returned, a shocking match emerged. The DNA corresponded to a man previously arrested for unrelated offenses but never linked to Bella. The discovery reignited the investigation and brought the case to the forefront of public attention. For the Moreno family, who had spent years navigating the silent agony of uncertainty, this revelation felt like both a lifeline and a confrontation with long-suppressed pain. The suspect, Thomas "Tommy" Langley, was a man in his early 40s who had maintained a low profile within the community for years, known to some as a quiet, seemingly ordinary neighbor. His past brushes with the law had not suggested the capacity for violence of the sort he was now being linked to. Behavioral experts would later explain that individuals capable of long-term concealment often display a duality in social settings, presenting as normal, dependable members of society while engaging in clandestine predatory behavior. Langley's unassuming demeanor had enabled him to evade suspicion, leaving investigators with a complicated puzzle. How could a person so seemingly ordinary have perpetrated such a heinous act? And how had he managed to remain undetected for nearly 2 decades? As the investigation resumed, Detective Cruz and her team meticulously reconstructed the timeline of Bella's last known movements. Interviews with former classmates, neighbors, and family members were revisited, and new insights emerged. Several witnesses recalled subtle details that had seemed inconsequential at the time. Neighbor's van parked unusually late, a fleeting glimpse of someone near Bella's usual walking route, but these recollections, when pieced together, began to outline a pattern consistent with the suspect's potential involvement. The psychology behind delayed recognition of threats became evident. Often, memory is clouded by assumptions and normalcy biases, causing people to overlook subtle cues of danger until hindsight clarifies them. The Moreno family, meanwhile, were caught between anticipation and dread. Each new development forced them to relive the emotional torment of Bella's disappearance while clinging to the hope that justice would finally be served. Psychologists involved with the case emphasized the complicated nature of post-traumatic resilience. The family's capacity to engage with the investigation, provide testimony, and maintain daily life was a testament to the human ability to persevere under prolonged stress. The months following the DNA discovery involved intensive interviews, forensic corroboration, and background checks, all aimed at building a case strong enough to withstand legal scrutiny. Public interest surged once news of the DNA match became known. The local community, which had long carried an unspoken fear and grief, was now both anxious and curious. Parents scrutinized their own neighborhoods. Neighbors exchanged guarded glances, and schools reinforced safety protocols. Experts noted that communities experiencing such revelations often exhibit heightened collective vigilance and a renewed sense of caution, behaviors driven by the lingering psychological imprint of unresolved trauma. Meanwhile, media coverage brought wider attention to Bella's story, framing it as a case study in the perseverance of law enforcement and the power of modern forensic technology to bring closure. Even after many years, as investigators prepared to confront Langley, a detailed psychological profile was developed to anticipate his likely responses. Behavioral analysts suggested that he might attempt to deny involvement, rationalize his actions, or manipulate the narrative to portray himself as misunderstood. Law enforcement strategized carefully, preparing for interrogation techniques that would maximize the likelihood of obtaining a truthful confession while minimizing the risk of misleading statements. The tension was palpable. Everyone involved understood the stakes, not only for legal resolution, but for the emotional closure of Bella's family and the broader community. The arrest was meticulously planned and executed. Langley was taken into custody without incident, yet the impact of seeing him physically present after all these years was profound for the Moreno family. Emotions ran high relief, anger, disbelief, and sorrow intermingled as they confronted the reality that the person responsible for their daughter's disappearance was finally within reach of the law. Psychologists observing the family's reactions emphasized that such encounters can trigger intense complex emotional responses as long-suppressed trauma surfaces in tangible form. Each moment of interaction carried weight, reinforcing the intersection of human psychology and the criminal justice process. The interrogation of Langley revealed the chilling depth of his deception. While initially resistant, he eventually provided detailed accounts of his actions, revealing both calculated planning and opportunistic behavior. His statements were analyzed extensively, highlighting a blend of manipulation, guilt, and rationalization. Experts later discussed how individuals involved in long-term concealment often experience cognitive dissonance, a psychological tension between their actions and self-perception, which can manifest in selective memory, minimization of wrongdoing, or attempts to justify behavior. For law enforcement, understanding these psychological mechanisms was critical in interpreting his confession and corroborating it with forensic evidence as the legal process moved forward. The town of Carson Valley grappled with a mixture of closure and ongoing grief. The knowledge that Bella's disappearance had been resolved brought a sense of relief, yet the emotional scars remained. Families engaged with local counseling services, community leaders facilitated discussions on safety, and schools implemented programs to educate children on awareness and self. The case also sparked national interest among experts in forensic science and criminal psychology, demonstrating how modern technology can solve cases long considered hopeless. The Moreno family began the painstaking process of healing, supported by therapy, community engagement, and advocacy. They became voices for awareness and resilience, sharing their story to help other families navigate the complexities of unresolved loss and the eventual discovery of truth. Psychologists emphasized that this process is ongoing. Closure does not erase trauma but allows for integration into a meaningful narrative, fostering strength and purpose even after profound loss. After Langley's arrest, the investigation intensified. Detective Hannah Cruz and her team worked tirelessly to corroborate his confession with the evidence collected over the previous 18 years. Each detail needed verification. Forensic science alone could not carry the case to conviction. Cruz revisited old witness statements, carefully cross-referencing accounts with Langley's admissions. Surprisingly, several minor recollections that had been dismissed at the time now fit together like pieces of a dark puzzle. For example, a neighbor's account of seeing a suspicious figure loitering near Bella's usual route at dusk suddenly aligned with Langley's description of how he had intercepted her. The detectives realized that memories, though fragmented and distorted by time, could become crucial when combined with modern evidence. Psychologists explained that memory retrieval can be enhanced by context cues, which investigators were now effectively using to reconstruct events that had occurred nearly 2 decades prior. Langley's confession shocked even seasoned investigators. He admitted that the crime had been opportunistic, executed with a chilling calmness that reflected careful planning. Behavioral experts later analyzed his account, noting the calculated nature of his actions. He had studied Bella's patterns, identified a window of vulnerability, and used isolation to ensure she could not call for help. This premeditation, combined with his ability to hide in plain sight for 18 years, illustrated a pattern often seen in serial offenders, individuals who blend ordinary social behavior with covert predatory tendencies. Understanding this duality became essential for law enforcement to anticipate his responses during trial preparation and for assessing potential future risks. The Moreno family's reactions were complex and intense. Isabella's mother, Carmen, oscillated between relief and despair. She had spent nearly 2 decades carrying the pain of uncertainty, often blaming herself for not preventing Bella's disappearance. Now, with Langley's admission, she felt the heavy weight of both closure and grief. Psychologists involved in the case emphasized the emotional complexity of such reunions with truth. Families often experience a mixture of vindication, sorrow, and anger, which can be emotionally exhausting but ultimately contributes to processing trauma. Carmen spent hours each day speaking with therapists, learning to channel her emotions into constructive action, while also preparing to face the public scrutiny that came with media attention. Community reactions were equally intense. Carson Valley, a town accustomed to a quiet, orderly life, suddenly found itself grappling with the unsettling reality that someone they had known for years had been living among them, harboring dark secrets. Parents reported heightened vigilance. Children were given more explicit guidance on safety, and local schools increased educational sessions on stranger danger and situational awareness. Sociologists noted that communities experiencing revelations of hidden crimes often display a surge in collective caution, an unconscious protective response to restore a sense of safety. Meanwhile, curiosity and anxiety mixed with relief, creating a complex social environment where trust had to be rebuilt carefully. Forensic experts played a central role in solidifying the case. The hair sample that had led to the breakthrough was subjected to exhaustive testing, confirming its origin as belonging to Langley and matching it to the DNA evidence found at the crime scene. In addition, technological advancements allowed investigators to uncover minute traces of biological material that had been overlooked in 2002. These findings not only reinforced Langley's confession but also addressed one of the critical challenges in cold cases, linking a suspect to the scene of the crime with contemporary methods that meet rigorous legal standards. Experts emphasized that this kind of meticulous scientific work is crucial for ensuring that convictions are based on incontrovertible evidence, reducing the likelihood of wrongful outcomes and enhancing public trust in the justice system. Langley's demeanor during interrogation provided further insight into his psychological state. Initially calm, he exhibited signs of internal conflict as detectives pressed him for details, a pattern consistent with cognitive dissonance observed in long-term offenders. Behavioral analysts noted that individuals who conceal crimes for extended periods often experience a constant, underlying tension between their self-perception and their actions, leading to behaviors such as selective disclosure, justification, or attempts to manipulate narratives. Detectives skillfully navigated these tendencies, using strategic questioning techniques to elicit truthful statements while minimizing opportunities for deception. Each confession segment became a key piece in reconstructing Bella's final hours and understanding the extent of Langley's premeditation. Meanwhile, media coverage amplified public awareness of the case. Stories highlighted the power of modern forensic science, the endurance of law enforcement efforts, and the resilience of the Moreno family. Experts warned, however, that widespread exposure could trigger secondary trauma for the family and the community. The careful balance between informing the public and protecting victims' families became a priority for local authorities. Carmen Moreno often spoke to reporters, sharing her perspective and advocating for awareness and safety education. She emphasized the importance of vigilance, not just for children, but for entire communities, illustrating the psychological and social ripple effects of unresolved crimes and their eventual resolution. As the trial approached, legal teams prepared meticulously. The prosecution focused on the convergence of DNA evidence, Langley's detailed confession, and corroborating witness statements, creating a narrative designed to withstand intense cross-examination. Defense attorneys attempted to challenge the reliability of long-past memories and questioned the validity of evidence preserved over nearly 2 decades. However, forensic advancements provided irrefutable links, and behavioral experts testified regarding Langley's psychological profile, reinforcing his capacity for premeditated, deliberate actions. The courtroom became a stage where human psychology, forensic science, and the quest for justice intersected, each element meticulously analyzed by both sides. The trial also revealed deeper social dynamics. Witnesses who had previously been hesitant to come forward now shared critical observations. Their delayed participation, influenced by fear, guilt, or normalcy bias, highlighted common human tendencies when confronting danger. Behavioral specialists noted that ordinary individuals often suppress or rationalize observations of suspicious behavior, especially in tight-knit communities where social harmony and trust are highly valued. Understanding these psychological factors became instrumental in piecing together the complete story of Bella's disappearance and Langley's actions. Throughout this process, the Moreno family relied heavily on professional support networks. Therapy sessions focused not only on grief, but also on rebuilding trust, managing anxiety, and preparing for courtroom exposure. Psychologists highlighted that prolonged uncertainty, like that experienced by the family, can result in complex trauma, characterized by heightened vigilance, emotional volatility, and persistent feelings of helplessness. By engaging with experts, the family gradually regained a sense of agency, allowing them to actively participate in the justice process rather than being passive observers of Langley's prosecution. As trial days unfolded, the courtroom was filled with tension. Testimonies detailed Bella's last known movements, Langley's deceptive tactics, and the painstaking efforts of investigators to uncover the truth. Jurors were presented with a combination of factual evidence and psychological insights, designed to help them understand the behaviors and motives of both the victim and the perpetrator. Experts emphasized that understanding the cognitive and emotional patterns of offenders is essential for accurate legal judgment, ensuring that sentences are based not only on actions, but also on intent and premeditation. Throughout this phase, the community observed a range of reactions. Some residents experienced renewed anxiety, realizing how close they had been to hidden danger, while others expressed relief that justice was finally within reach. Local support groups formed, providing spaces for collective discussion and emotional processing. Sociologists noted that communal trauma, when addressed openly, can strengthen social bonds and enhance collective resilience. The story of Bella's case, widely reported, served as both a cautionary tale and an example of perseverance, inspiring other families dealing with cold cases to persist in seeking answers. By the end of Part 2, investigators had successfully constructed a comprehensive narrative linking Langley to Bella's disappearance. Supported by scientific evidence, witness accounts, and psychological analysis, the stage was set for the final act, the conclusion of the trial, the delivery of justice, and the difficult yet essential process of closure for Bella's family and the community. The trial reached its climax in early spring, nearly 18 years after Bella Moreno vanished from her quiet Nevada neighborhood. The courtroom was tense, every seat filled with locals, journalists, and members of law enforcement who had pursued the case for decades. Detective Hannah Cruz sat near the front, reviewing her notes for the 100th time, knowing that every detail, every carefully preserved piece of evidence, could tip the scales of justice. As the judge called the proceedings to order, a hush fell over the room. Bella's parents, Carmen and Luis Moreno, sat side by side, holding hands, their eyes reflecting a mixture of anticipation, fear, and the faint hope that after all these years, the truth would finally come to light. The emotional weight of the moment was palpable. The court proceedings were more than legal formalities. They were a culmination of years of psychological endurance, human patience, and relentless investigative work. The prosecution opened by detailing the sequence of events as reconstructed from Langley's confession, corroborated by DNA evidence, witness statements, and forensic findings. Each piece was presented with meticulous care. The DNA match, which had been the breakthrough in reopening the cold case, was explained in simple but compelling terms, emphasizing how advanced technology now allowed investigators to confirm what had previously been a series of assumptions. The lead prosecutor highlighted Langley's methodical planning, noting that the 18-year gap did not diminish the premeditated nature of the crime. Psychological experts testified, detailing how Langley's patterns of concealment, manipulation, and deception aligned with behaviors seen in long-term offenders, reinforcing the prosecution's argument about his culpability and intent. The courtroom listened intently, absorbing not just the factual narrative but the psychological depth behind the actions. Witnesses took the stand, each providing fragments of memory that, when combined, painted a coherent picture of Bella's final day. One neighbor recalled a man matching Langley's description loitering near the street where Bella often played. Another testified about noticing her absence from her usual routines, remembering the quiet anxiety that had settled over the neighborhood at the time. These recollections, seemingly minor, had been overlooked in the initial investigation, but now they formed critical evidence that connected Langley to Bella's disappearance. Experts emphasized the role of memory in cold cases, noting that, while recollections can be distorted over time, context, cues, and corroboration with tangible evidence can validate otherwise forgotten details. Langley's demeanor in court drew intense scrutiny. Throughout the proceedings, he appeared composed, but occasionally displayed subtle signs of anxiety when confronted with incontrovertible evidence. Behavioral analysts noted that long-term offenders often present a controlled exterior while internally managing guilt, fear, and the constant calculation of self-preservation. Langley's intermittent slips, small hesitations, and micro-expressions were carefully noted by the jury and experts alike, providing insight into his internal state and lending credibility to his prior confessions. The prosecution emphasized these behavioral patterns to highlight the deliberate nature of his crimes, countering any defense argument that might suggest impulsivity or lack of intent. Carmen and Luis Moreno observed the testimony with restrained emotion. Yet the psychological strain of reliving their daughter's disappearance was evident. For nearly 2 decades, they had navigated the uncertainty and grief of not knowing Bella's fate. Trauma experts had worked closely with them, helping to process memories, cope with anxiety, and prepare emotionally for the intense scrutiny of a public trial. Each witness statement, each revelation about Langley's actions required them to confront their daughter's final moments in vivid detail, balancing sorrow with the relief that a path to justice had finally emerged. The emotional interplay between grief and closure underscored the profound psychological impact of long unsolved crimes on families, illustrating how justice is not merely a legal concept but a deeply human one. The defense attempted to cast doubt on the long interval between the crime and the arrest, suggesting that memories could be unreliable and forensic evidence degraded over time. However, the prosecution effectively countered these points by demonstrating the rigor of modern DNA analysis, the careful preservation of physical evidence, and the consistency of Langley's detailed confession with both forensic findings and witness accounts. Behavioral experts also testified about the psychological profiles of individuals, who commit concealed crimes for extended periods, explaining that Langley's ability to remain hidden and manipulate perceptions over 18 years was consistent with calculated, intentional behavior rather than coincidence or misidentification. During cross-examination, Langley attempted to minimize his involvement, offering vague statements that contradicted known facts. Investigators had anticipated this, preparing precise, evidence-backed questions that exposed inconsistencies and reinforced the prosecution's narrative. The jurors were guided through a meticulous reconstruction of Bella's last hours, including the path she had taken, the moment she had been intercepted, and the concealment of critical evidence. Forensic details, combined with psychological analysis, allowed the jury to understand not just what had happened, but why Langley had acted as he did. The courtroom became a microcosm of human psychology and investigative expertise, each testimony revealing layers of thought, emotion, and intention behind the crime. As the trial progressed, community members expressed a range of emotions. Some felt relief and satisfaction that justice was finally within reach, while others struggled with renewed anxiety, realizing that someone capable of committing such a crime had lived among them undetected for so long. Support groups were established, offering a forum for shared processing of collective trauma, a phenomenon commonly observed in small communities affected by violent crimes. Sociologists emphasize that the collective experience of long unsolved crimes shapes community behavior, influencing trust, social cohesion, and proactive safety measures. In Carson Valley, these efforts were particularly visible as residents engaged in discussions, workshops, and public forums to rebuild a sense of security. Throughout the trial, the Moreno family's resilience became evident. Carmen often spoke to the media, advocating for heightened awareness and safety education, while emphasizing the importance of patience and persistence in cold case investigations. She highlighted how modern forensic advancements, combined with diligent law enforcement work and community vigilance, can finally bring long-delayed justice. Her advocacy provided a sense of purpose and control, helping her navigate the emotional turbulence of reliving a tragedy while transforming her experience into meaningful action for others. Finally, after days of testimony, the jury deliberated. The weight of nearly 2 decades of evidence, expert testimony, and detailed confessions left little room for doubt. Psychological insights helped jurors understand the complexity of Langley's behavior, reinforcing the intentional, premeditated nature of the crime. After a tense period of deliberation, the foreperson announced the verdict: guilty on all counts. The Moreno family experienced a mix of relief, validation, and sorrow, a bittersweet culmination of years of waiting. Justice had been achieved, yet the emotional scars of the case would persist, shaped by the trauma of loss and the passage of time. The sentencing phase underscored the importance of both accountability and reflection. The judge emphasized that Langley's deliberate concealment, manipulation, and lack of remorse warranted a substantial sentence, reflecting both the severity of the crime and the enduring impact on the victim's family and community. Behavioral analysts noted that sentencing decisions in cases involving long-term concealment often serve dual purposes: punishment and societal reassurance, affirming the community's moral and legal standards. For the Moreno family, the verdict provided an opportunity to begin psychological closure, a chance to process grief within the framework of justice finally delivered. In the weeks following the trial, the community began the gradual process of recovery. Counseling sessions, community forums, and public education initiatives aimed to rebuild trust and promote safety. Experts highlighted the role of collective healing in mitigating the long-term psychological impact of violent crimes, noting that communities can develop resilience when trauma is acknowledged, discussed, and addressed collaboratively. The Moreno family, while still mourning Bella, found comfort in the knowledge that the person responsible had been held accountable, and that their daughter's story could serve as a catalyst for awareness and prevention. The Nevada 2002 cold case became a case study in perseverance, scientific innovation, and the integration of psychology into law enforcement. It demonstrated how modern DNA analysis, careful preservation of evidence, and strategic psychological insights can converge to resolve even the most challenging cold cases. Investigators reflected on the lessons learned, the importance of maintaining meticulous records, revisiting overlooked evidence, and considering the psychological dimensions of both suspects and victims. Forensic advancements combined with human expertise allowed justice to be delivered in a way that honored the memory of Bella Moreno and provided closure for those who had waited nearly 2 decades for truth and accountability. By the end of Part 3, Bella's story, though tragic, stood as a testament to the enduring commitment of law enforcement, the power of modern science, and the resilience of a family and community navigating trauma. The resolution of the case reinforced the principle that time alone does not erase responsibility, and that persistent, methodical investigations, supported by psychological understanding and technological innovation, can uncover hidden truths and restore justice, even after decades of uncertainty. The Moreno family, while forever marked by loss, could now begin to heal, strengthened by the knowledge that Bella's life had been acknowledged, and her story finally completed with the accountability of the person who had taken her away.